Good morning. Welcome to Cafecito con Colon. It's going to be another beautiful day here in the land of enchantment. We've got a great guest for you this morning, Nichole Rogers. Just an incredible bundle of energy and joy, making an impact and difference in New Mexico on a daily basis. We're glad she's here. We can't wait to introduce you to her. Thank you for dropping by Cafecito con Colon so you can all be my extrovert therapist. Thank you very much. It's going to be about a beautiful 90 degrees, maybe 92 today. Not too hot, just right. See here. All right, we're going to get up some links here real quick this morning on this beautiful Tuesday morning, the 23rd day of June. Today will be the end of the 4th week of Black Voices on Cafecito con Colon, where we have had many trusted voices join us to give us perspective and insight and to teach us how we can know better so that we can do better and be better. And we're very excited to have Nichole with us this morning. And let me get us started and cranking. Good morning, Dr. Roy Ball. Good morning, Dee and Danny and Alex Vaz. Alex, I got to go back and check out your meditation today. I think you had a meditation regarding historical figures or something like that. It caught my attention, but I couldn't focus and get on live this morning, but I'll look forward to going back. Breezy Bree, I'm glad you're with us this morning. And Bree, we need to text each other because I want to have you on Cafecito con Colon. So I hope you'll join me here within the next few days. We've got some great guests coming up, but I'd love to get you on the show. Love you very much and appreciate all you are doing. Good morning, Lisa. Good morning, Ms. Baca. Love to the Baca family. Hope Chris had a great Father's Day. I know that that had to be a day filled with emotions and reflections, and just know that our hearts continue to be with you and your family. Love to Chris and to you. Good morning, PLC. It is a breezy morning on the trail with a few conejitos. We got little rabbits running around the trails up there by PLC's place. Ms. Olmsted, thanks for joining us this morning. And good morning, Rebecca Puckster. Thank you for joining me each morning. So we are going to bring light and life to New Mexico right here on Cafecito con Colon. Let me start out with some local news, and then we'll move to a little bit of national news, and then we are going to get to Nichole and the WellStand Foundation. The WellStand being an Afrikaans word for meaning well-being, and she embraces all that is associated with well-being, and she is really changing our community in substantial ways. Right now, the WellStand Foundation is focusing on the census, working with iCount, and doing great things to make sure that New Mexico stands up and is counted. As we've talked about on this show before, New Mexico is one of the most difficult places when it comes to every 10 years and trying to get our families to be counted because of our rural nature, because of our background and our approach to engaging with government, particularly as it relates to our people of color. We're not always the first to stand up and say, hey, I'd love to talk to the United States government about who steps in my front door every day. So we are trying to change that. Nichole works on that every day, and I look forward to her sharing some of her insights about where we're at, where we need to be, and how we can get there. Okay, so let me start out. We continue to deal with some very difficult issues and current affairs. A heartbreaking story. Good morning, Lynn Troyon. A heartbreaking story covered very well in the Santa Fe Reporter about one of my friend's businesses there in Santa Fe, the India Palace, and they were severely vandalized with some very hateful messages, thousands of dollars worth of damage, and just a very difficult story to read. In terms of other difficult stories to read, I know many of you saw my quote in the Albuquerque Journal regarding Loveless Women's Center and Hospital, and their alleged profiling of women coming in to give birth and separating Native women from their babies upon delivery, and my deep concerns with that, the governor's deep concerns with that, and the feds coming in with their investigation. This story on New Mexico in depth, and ProPublica have done, they're the ones that shine the light on this story, and I appreciate their great investigative journalism related to that. And we will continue to monitor that. And the Office of the State Auditor is deeply concerned, and will do what's necessary to make sure we get to the bottom of this story. And there are more and more evidence is coming out that the administration maybe hid evidence related to this, has reminded their employees that they don't have to talk to the feds during this initial investigation. Very troubling all the way around, especially since Loveless is one of our premier healthcare providers in New Mexico, and an organization that I've respected and appreciated and valued for many, many years. So we will continue to watch that. In the good news department of New Mexico landscape, I want to say that I'm very happy that for the first time, I think in 3 months, there were no deaths reported for our COVID-19 pandemic's impact on New Mexico. We did have about 128 new cases, but no deaths were reported, which was very, very exciting. The Balloon Fiesta, big news in that. We have postponed the 49th annual Balloon Fiesta. This is KOB's coverage of that, and we will not have a Balloon Fiesta this year. Huge blow to the tourism department, huge blow to Albuquerque's local economy, substantial impact on particular areas of New Mexico's business landscape, particularly small businesses that rely upon those 800,000 visitors or 900,000 visitors for the Balloon Fiesta on an annual basis. A lot of our businesses in Old Town, which are featured, I think, in the written story in the Albuquerque Journal about this and the impact that'll have on Old Town. But that was a gut-wrenching decision that had to be made, and we support the committee that had to make that decision in their ultimate decision for the public safety, health, and welfare of the community. But we definitely will all feel the pain in the year to come this fall without our Balloon Fiesta. Here's some good coverage from the Albuquerque Journal about the session that just ended, the special session. They did pass out the police camera, lapel camera and video bill. They shored up the budget, and they also passed about $400 million in low interest loans for our small businesses, and I think also addressed some unemployment implications for our small businesses and their unemployment premiums. Here's the Albuquerque Journal story on the Balloon Fiesta that I just mentioned regarding the impact on our small businesses there. So that's some of our local news. And in our national news, NASCAR has been in the news a lot lately. Good morning, JP. Good to see you, buddy. The New York Times covered the Bubba Wallace story and that very tragic racism that he experienced by finding a noose at the Talladega garage where he operates out of, and just awful. But some great NASCAR news with his colleagues rallying around him and putting him out in front, I think, for the pole position. But check that out. Also, in regards to our work in becoming not just individuals who can say I'm not a racist, but also being able to say I'm anti-racism, and all educating so that we can know better, so that we can be better, and we can do better, which is a take on Maya Angelou's quote that I'm adjusting and adopting to be one of my own. But this is a great story from our Optimist Daily about how we bring, very short, but just basically talking about cultural competency and awareness as we teach and educate young children of color in light of their position and their circumstances in the classroom. So let's see here. Oh, here's Robin Holder is an incredible artist who I'm learning a lot about. Lynn, you'll love this, but Robin Holder is an activist, incredible artist, works with many mediums, and she has roots as an African, Russian, Jewish, Caribbean me say that again, an African Russian Jewish Caribbean. That's her family background. And I'm going to, I think, thanks to Elizabeth, of one of the foundations, we're also going to feature down the road. But Elizabeth has agreed to connect me up with Robin Holder, and her tag is "Let's raise our racial IQ with art." Let's raise our racial IQ with art, and she is very powerful. Here is a great article that features some of her photographs or photographs of her work, and I can't wait to have her on. I think that's going to happen within the next week. But this particular blog that I just posted regarding Robin's work is an artistic view of the pandemic and social inequality. So very, very cool. Hey, thank you, Ms. Olmsted, for putting up that GoFundMe link to support India Palace. I will be jumping on there with a small contribution from Aleli and me. So let's see, in the good news category, there's going to be another cool concert coming up by Live Nation, and also Shakira. I don't have a link to this. Maybe somebody can find it and post it for me. But Shakira tied up with Global Citizen, and they rolled out a huge billing led by Shakira. They're going to do a concert, I think, this weekend online. But there's the Live Nation launch of doing a concert series, and with Brad Paisley, Darius Rucker, John Party, Nelly, good old Nelly. All right. And then finally, they did release the official trailer to Hamilton, the movie that's going to be coming up, and I thought I would share that with you as well. So with that, how am I doing on time? I am right on the money, 9:13. So let me start out by putting up the homepage to the Wellstand Foundation, which I was telling Nichole this morning that I keep wanting to say Wellstone Foundation, which many of you are familiar with Paul Wellstone's, the legacy of Paul Wellstone, who passed away untimely in an accident. He set up, of course, the Wellstone Foundation, or actually he had the foundation, I think, before he passed, about community organizing and political engagement. Thank you, man. Ms. Olmsted is on it. There's the Global Citizen #Shakira link for the upcoming content and concert there with Global Citizen. Thank you, Hanik, for that. So the Wellstand Foundation is doing great work. Right now, they are focusing on Census 2020 to make sure that New Mexico is counted. And she's got a great vision for their next project right after the census. We are going to talk a bit about that. Let me not fail to put up a good landing page for Census 2020, because that's something we're going to talk about. But first, so this is the final day of the 4th week of Black Trusted Voices on Cafecito con Colon. Many of you that have been following my work for the last 4 months or 3.5 months know that I've hosted Cafecitos to feature individuals, organizations making an impact in our community and in New Mexico. And after the killing of George Floyd, I woke up that Tuesday morning after the weekend, I think it was, and realized that I had to clear the deck and provide a space that was safe, a place for me to grow, a place for me to know better, Maya Angelou, to know better so that I could be better. And we've had a lot of incredible Black voices on, and this morning's will be no less incredible than those that we've had. Yesterday, we had the Brigadier General. We had, in the last week, we had people like our poet laureate, Hakeem Bellamy. We had Charles Ashley III of Community Impact and Cultivating Coders fame. We've had just phenomenal leaders, Harold Pope Jr. We've had just great guests who've allowed me to grow, allowed me to be very vulnerable. My political advisors tell me that I have created now over 100 hours of material for my opponents to use against me, because I've been very transparent and very vulnerable and very candid about my lack of depth in some of these matters where I should have had more depth. And as I sit here today on the 23rd of June, I do have more depth. thanks to people like Nichole who have come to share their lived experience. And so with that, let me just tell you about the foundation and Nichole. WellStand Foundation is a 501c3 that was just started 1 year ago. We're on her 1 year anniversary of Wellstone by a community, a group of members that really were part of other organizational leadership, and they wanted to improve the health equity in New Mexico for people of color. And WellStand is Afrikaans for well-being, and I mentioned that early today, and has the vision of serving as a hub for all things involving the well-being of our communities, with a specific emphasis on the well-being of people of color in New Mexico. WellStand Foundation currently has a governing board of 4 community members, and the founder serves as the Chief Impact Officer, the CIO, not the Chief Information Officer, but the Chief Impact Officer, and impact she does. And this is Nichole Rogers. She is the founder of WellStand Foundation. She's got experience both in the public and private sector. She's built relationships across the board within institutions, outside institutions, community organizing. She is just driving positive change in our community every day. She currently works at UNMH, the UNM hospitals, in the Department of Nursing Excellence as a staff development specialist, and founded the foundation as a direct response to the gaps she sees every day in healthcare, particularly in healthcare for people of color, who we know have an overrepresentation in terms of a lack of access, knowledge, and engagement in the healthcare system. Ms. Rogers has a background in customer service, leadership development, and process improvement, and has given her a passion for capacity building. And Nichole is known to be a positive influence whose superpowers are removing communication barriers to promote effective resolutions, removing communication barriers to promote effective resolutions and solutions. That is her superpower. And in addition, she's a master at getting individuals to connect with each other on deeper, genuine levels. And that's what we're going to do this morning. We are going to be candid, transparent, vulnerable, and we are going to connect on a deeper level. Her passion to improve the experience for people of African descent in New Mexico drives her work every day, and she is filling the gap for children on the behavioral health scene and transitional housing, and she just makes a difference every day. We have something in common in that she was born as a campus baby. And I wasn't born as a campus baby, but shortly after Aleli and I got married, we were blessed to be, Aleli got pregnant, you know how that works. And our baby boy, Rafael, was born as a campus baby at New Mexico State University. Nichole hails from Highlands University, beautiful San Miguel County, Condado de San Miguel, at Highlands University, and her parents were both incredible athletes. I'll let her tell a little bit more of her story. And with that, I am going to introduce to you Miss Incredible, Miss Impact, Miss Community Organizer, and filling the gap every single day for children and people of color in New Mexico. Welcome to Cafecito con Colon, Miss Nichole Rogers.
Wow, what an introduction. Thank you so much for having me. You got me all fired up over here.
All right, fired up and ready to go. Where have we heard that one before?
Right? Thank
Hey,
you so
talk
much.
about fired up and ready to go. We've got some great guests here with us this morning. Tuning in live, we've got about 40 people here. We got Dr. Jennifer Gomez Chavez. We got Chris Laranaga. Beverly's with us. Beverly's known me since I was a little kid. And she tells me never stop being vulnerable. Well, she should know that when I was a child and when I was very vulnerable and I was very bullied and picked on and heavy set and freckle face, Coke bottle glasses, she and her sister were always very kind to me, and I'll never forget it. And I'm grateful for that. Beverly, thanks for joining us on Cafecito con Colon. Nichole, tell us a little bit about your journey. And maybe I talked about you hailing from northern New Mexico, what I call the Hispanic beautiful backbone of our state up in San Miguel County.
Yeah, I was born there. My dad was on a football scholarship there at Highlands. My mom was on a softball scholarship. And so I spent the first 9 months of my life on campus running around, and they were dorm parents. And that's how I know Lawrence, and from way back when I was little. And so it was an interesting place to grow up with an African-American father and a beautiful Hispanic wife with little mixed kids with green eyes. Our lived experience was quite intense in Albuquerque. Santa Fe, grew up in Santa Fe, and think we moved from Vegas when I was, I want to say kindergarten or just after kindergarten. But I have vivid memories of, kind of the looks that my parents would get walking around with us, and, playing in my front yard and having people, drive by and scream the N-word at us and things like that. It was vivid memories of struggles that we had growing up there. But
Wow.
Highlands was a great place as far as I really did see my parents be able to utilize the resources that were there, and that's really what it's all about, is just opening the doors to these institutions so that we all can benefit from the resources that are available.
That's exactly right. And you're really opening doors for a lot of people right now. And you're really impacting New Mexico's financial landscape and our ability to tell our story. Because as we know, part of your work at WellStand is to cooperate and collaborate with the Census 2020, which obviously drives everything from early childhood development dollars to roads resources and infrastructure resources from the federal government, because we only get counted once every 10 years. We only have one shot at this, and we got to get it right. And we'll talk more about that during the second half of our visit. I want to kind of stay on your experience there in San Miguel County, and you talking about you being in the front yard. And those days are gone. Actually, we don't have front yards anymore. We all play in our backyards, and so that's an interesting concept in itself. And part of why I think we, in some ways, are not as connected as a community, because we all drive into our garages, we walk through the laundry room or through our mud room or into our house, and so many of us that middle class people have a home with a garage, and we never have to talk to our neighbors because we're never in the front yard. Porches and patios on the front yard, they don't exist anymore by and large. And so what's interesting about that is I always thought that was a point of challenge for us as community and knowing one another. But unfortunately, in your experience, having been in the front yard, your memory is a real negative one.
Yeah, I think growing up in Vegas, those are the memories, unfortunately, that are tied to living there, and campus life. I think seeing a difference between, I was so young, but going back and, for different functions for the college, football games, I have really fond memories of things like that. And so I really,
Yeah, but
I think
wasn't
that's
your dad
why.
on the field? Wasn't your dad on the field?
Yeah, and then he coached afterwards. After he left school there, he coached during the only time they won a national championship. So that was pretty awesome. So I have really fond memories, in addition to some of the tough memories that I think for me early, I learned that the institutions that exist in our communities can have a big impact on the people in the community. And if we can, fix things in our institutions, it will definitely help the people that live in the communities. And that's one of my passions.
Tell me what you mean by that in terms of those institutions having a deep impact. How did the institutions, you started at Highlands?
Yeah, like I said, for Highlands, for me, I have fond memories of the community of the campus, right? Like everybody, rooting for each other and being excited when somebody excelled, and when somebody achieved something, there was a community of people that were behind you and excited. And even to this day, seeing my dad go back for reunions and still being tied to those people, and me growing up in the community and people saying, hey, I remember you from Highlands when you were little running around. That type of community really can change the trajectory of somebody's life. And so I'm really passionate about any institution that I'm a part of. I try to open the doors as wide as I can for my community, which is the Hispanic and Black, so that we can have resources and be plugged into the resources, because then the trajectory of our life can be changed by these institutions if they're doing things for the people.
No, that's exactly right. I always like to say that, at least as it relates to the Office of the State Auditor and some of the work I do there, I always like to say, not only do I open the door wide and I've got an open door policy, but I actually take the door off the hinges. Yeah. And I think in some ways you do that as well.
I love that. I really love that, because all the data, all the research shows that you educate the mothers, right? Then they're going to go and educate the community. And I think that's what we need to get back to, is how can we, the people who work in these major institutions, make sure that they're opening the door wide. And I like that. I'm gonna adopt that. Take off the hinges.
That's
so
right.
that people
The
can
doors
get in.
off the hinges.
I love it. Because
Hey, so then after you were about 5 or 6 when you left Las Vegas, and then where did you go? Did you say you went to Santa Fe?
yeah, then we went to Santa Fe and it was great. I have fond memories of Santa Fe. My uh, grandfather was the state fire marshal. So every year we got to watch the fiestas and the parades and the pet parades and all of the things that go on in Santa Fe during fiestas there. Zozobra, we had, the best seat right at the firehouse right there. I have such fond memories of growing up in Santa Fe with especially with my grandfather. State fair time. I'm super sad to hear the balloon fiesta was postponed because that's one of my childhood fond memories of getting up at dark from Santa Fe, him driving us over to Balloon Fiesta Park and just being amazed at the massive balloons. And really for me, I think the community, again, that's a place where you can go and see people from all over the world just hanging out together. No drama, no mess, just community. So I love that.
Good point. Good point. How was your experience in Santa Fe in grade school and then middle school? And then I don't know where you graduated high school from, but how was that experience a little different? Or how did I talk often about the lens we look through and how that lens is developed. And yours is complicated because you come from this Black father and Hispanic mother. And you grew up in a community that is, like I said, part of the beautiful Hispanic backbone of New Mexico, and very proud of that culture and fiestas and that. And then you go to Santa Fe, which also honors that Hispanic heritage in a very substantial way. And even I think last night or the night before, the obelisk was vandalized again. And so there's a lot of turmoil there right now. And during this deep conversation that we're having about community and about our history and our story. So tell me, how did your lens start to shift after you moved from San Miguel County to Santa Fe County?
I think in Santa Fe, I think I came to the realization because there's not a lot of people that looked like us in Santa Fe. So, I knew that I felt like all the Black families we all hung out together. I definitely remember, being one of the only besides the King family that lived up the street that were also mixed. I was lucky that I had people like that to connect and build our own community with. But I definitely in Santa Fe started noticing that I think in Vegas, I was too little to understand what all that meant. But in
Right.
Santa Fe, really just starting to notice that we were, the only, Black kids in school, and really I didn't fit in with the Spanish folks, and the Black folks were like, are you really Black? Because of my light eyes and the privilege that I have by being the skin color that I am, because even in the Black community, we have to be honest about that. That, my darker sisters definitely don't get the same privileges that I do, and that is sad. And so I think I noticed definitely a difference and started noticing things, that unfortunately the N-word was a normal part of when we got in arguments with other students. That was the first thing that would come out of their mouth. But I remember being little and thinking, and I know it's weird and people may judge me for this, but thinking when they would call me that, I would think, oh, they knew I was Black. Like what? Like, wow, they knew I was Black. And it was the weirdest kind of, it definitely adds a different layer to the conversation.
Well, the dissonance, right? The dissonance between being proud that they actually recognize who you were as a Black woman, but the dissonance of the hugely negative connotation of that word.
Yeah, I think still now I get emotional thinking about that because it's a different struggle, right? Like you're excited that they knew who you were, but at the same time, it's a horrible thing to be called. So I think so.
In so many ways, I think back of my time, and thank you for sharing that. And, it's just so interesting because I think about one of my childhood friends was David Gilliam, and he was extremely popular Black man, and but he was a great athlete. He had a charming personality. And I think now, in the context of the conversations we're having now, I think that he would be, even though he's one of the only African Americans at the school, and in our class, one of maybe 2 or 3 out of 300, I think. Um, I think that so many, looking back, it's kind of like, well, the real perspective is he was one of the good ones.
Mhm.
Just so hard to admit, right? Because he was an athlete and he was charming, and we just never struggled or even thought about how we received him, and how we might have received him if he was just a little different.
Yeah, that's pretty deep, and we have those conversations in our community all the time. Like people love our culture and our zest and our zeal for life and the extra bounce that's in our step, right? But they don't, but at the same time, they don't want to sign up to be Black. You know what I mean? So I think that's a real conversation that we have all the time in the Black community, definitely.
Yeah, I can really appreciate that. And I'll give a shout out to David. I know he's a new daddy. I think he had his a great Father's Day because he just had a new baby. So I'm
Oh,
gonna tag him here and bring him into the conversation. But I appreciate that. And then did you graduate from Santa Fe, in Santa Fe?
no, then we moved, I think right in sixth grade, we moved to Albuquerque. And it was I think that was a really great move for our family. Bigger town, more things to do as we got older. Definitely more Black folks in Albuquerque than Santa Fe,
Hmm.
which was really great. So starting to see more, going to finally having a Black teacher. That was, I'll never forget Mr. Nichole at LBJ, who was an African man that taught art. And that's one of the things we do in diversity trainings. We do some forced choice exercises that really help paint the picture that diversity is not just about Black, white, Spanish. It really includes things like education. And when we ask questions like that, when was the first time you had a man of color or a woman of color as a teacher? And sometimes people don't ever stand up when we ask that. They've never, or sometimes it takes till graduate school, when we asked when was the first time you had someone that looked like you as a teacher. And that
We
makes a difference.
absolutely, absolutely, especially in New Mexico. Let's
Yeah.
just be real. Like in Los Lunas High School, they did not have an African American full-time educator at the high school until 1989, I believe it was. Uh, and then we got a second one. And I think somebody has recounted the story, or I've recounted the story here, where another teacher who, frankly, I didn't like anyway. I was not fond of this teacher. I had her for one of my classes and never thought she was much of anything. But she walked by the break room with the two African American teachers sitting there, and she thought it was funny, I'm sure. But she walked by and said, "Hey, no drug dealing here." And you just know that she would have never said that if that was two white educators sitting in that break room. But that's a
Yeah.
true story because it was told to me by one of the African American teachers that was sitting in that break room.
Oh,
I mean,
that's so
how
sad.
unbelievable is that?
Unfortunately, it's not unbelievable. Is the sad thing is that, even here at my work at UNM Hospital, I get the privilege of every year hosting Black history type events and trainings. And one of the things we talk about is microaggressions and there are no place for that when you are giving care to somebody. I don't care what their background is. Just teaching our clinicians that, even here for my first appointment, when I had my son 2 years ago, I come to my first OB appointment and the clerk hands me the form for the mom and father information. And she says quietly, as she slides it to me, "It's okay if you don't know the dad's information."
Mm.
And I'm thinking, and I looked at her and I said, "Well, why would you say that? He's just parking the car. Like, what about me did you look at and think you don't know your baby daddy, or you don't know who the father of your child is?" And so even in when we're delivering care, those microaggressions change how you care for people of color. And it's sad, but those are the things that we have to get rid of in our institutions, is those types of, you know, comments.
But until we talk about them like we're talking about them here, people don't, they're not going to know better. And and what we have to do is go from this place of not saying those things and even being self-aware about microaggressions, to being willing to call it out when we see it. It's like that slogan we started back in on 9/11, right? You see something, say something, right? Like it's the same thing here. I talk about at the Office of the State Auditor all the time when we fight waste, fraud, and abuse. You see something, say something. Well, we got to apply that same mantra to racism and to microaggressions and to bad behavior based on race. It's like you see something, say something. Make that person uncomfortable, because you know what they've done? They've made you uncomfortable. They made Nichole Rogers uncomfortable. So why shouldn't Brian Colon stand up and say, hey, you're out of line?
Mhm.
That is
That's
racism in itself. Not all racists wear pointy white hats.
Amen to that. And thank you for saying that, because I think that's, I've gotten a lot of friends that aren't of color that asking, what can we do? And a lot of times it's like, where should we donate? And it's bigger than donating. Yes, we need that, but we more need you to stand up in the moment, immediately, when you hear something, when you see something in the moment, be bold enough to use your privilege to stop it in the moment. And
Totally.
then even go further than that and in front of that person, to the person of color, and say, I am so sorry for what just happened to you. That is not okay. And I will not stand by and let that happen. And that includes when you're in the community, when you're in your institutions, when you're in meetings. It happens so much. And people of color we have to just deal with it, and kind of those microaggressions, we learn to shrug it off. But I'm so sick of shrugging it off. I'm just sick of having to swallow it. And even little things like walking with my father or my brothers who are who are Black, and seeing somebody clutch their purse when we get in the elevator, or we sit in the movie theater and they move chairs to the other side, or quietly move their purse from our side to the other side. Little things like that weigh on you daily when you have to go out of your house. There's just so many layers to those things that we have to deal with every day. And I don't want to anymore. And I don't want to have to just shrug those things off.
Well, we don't want you to shrug them off, and we're going to stand with you, and we're going to call it out, and we're going to say something when we see something and hear something. And, John says there's no such thing as microaggression. And I think what his point is, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think, his point would be what we call a microaggression doesn't have a micro impact on you. It has a deep impact on you. And so I posted a great NPR piece about microaggressions. But I think I get John's point. I think, unless he's really denying the fact that there is such thing as a microaggression, I don't think that's true.
And microaggressions, they're not just about your color of skin or where your cultural background is. Microaggressions can happen to women. The whole "you're good for math for a girl." There's microaggressions that come with lots of different backgrounds. It's not just about Black or white.
Totally. In fact, I'm going to post up a story that I found. I think I'll post on the main page here on the main feed instead as a response to John. But psychology.com, Psychology Today, which is a magazine that Aleli gets, talks about that. So that's the headline. What you just said is the headline. So that's a 10-year-old piece. So thank you for bringing that up, Nichole.
Yeah,
Let's
thank you
talk.
for
Look, we've got about 20 minutes, 19 minutes left. I want to make sure that we get to the core of your great work. Not that your lived experience isn't even more powerful than that, and I appreciate you being so candid about that. And maybe we'll end that piece with, this moment in time, being of mixed race is always complicated, but now maybe even more complicated because you're dealing with the Black Lives Matter movement and how that relates to you and what's your identity in that. And then over here, we're having this conversation too about the Hispanic heritage of our state and whether statues of Juan de Oñate are appropriate and whether those statues can be contextualized in a way that removes the pain for some indigenous people. I mean, there are indigenous people in our community, Native Americans in our community, who say, look, just the statue in itself, I don't care how much context you put around it. I don't care if you put a statue of Popeye beside it. It is still traumatic for me to see this more than life-size statue of a man who committed such atrocities against our people. We're having that conversation over here. We're having the Black Lives Matter conversation over here, and Nichole sits right here. What does that mean, and what does that feel like?
I think I'm just grateful for my parents and what they taught me, that nobody owes you anything, right? Because of who I am, because I'm Black and I'm Hispanic. I think for me, it's pretty clear that those two topics are for me one. You know, our indigenous community has suffered just like the Black community, and to you know, our state definitely, especially growing up in Santa Fe, we learned about Don Diego de Vargas and all of that, and they had the court, and that was ingrained. We did it in school, and we learned about those things in school. But I think when you grow up and you learn the true history, then you are embarrassed that we would glorify such tragedy. I mean, it really, regardless of what you think about it, people lost their lives. Hundreds and thousands and millions of people lost their lives that are indigenous and that are African American. And so for me, to me, it's one in the same conversation. And it's about this country. This is the fabric of this country. It is ingrained in the fabric of everything that we do in this country. And in order to change that, we have to dismantle, and pun is intended, the things like our statues that point to and it's not about forgetting our history. It's just about honoring the truth of the history, which is the way we got here was not pretty. The way that this country was founded was not pretty. And it's not about erasing it. It's just about being honest about history and telling the truth. I consider myself a truth seeker, and truth matters. So both of these things are close to my heart and really, really one for me.
I really appreciate that. I really appreciate that. And I like I said, the lens you look through is complex. And at this moment in time, when we're having this exact conversation, you being a child of a Black man and a Hispanic woman, gives you a very unique voice. And I appreciate you bringing that trusted voice to Cafecito con Colon. I think we're all better for it. And I think we're also all better for it because you started an incredible organization called the Wellstand Foundation. And you have decided to find ways to fill the gap for children of color, communities of color in New Mexico, and to really stand in that gap so that far fewer of our children fall through. And being a first generation college graduate, you know, first in my family to go to college and break the cycle of poverty, I am quick to say that many people and equally important, many organizations filled the gap. So I didn't fall through, and I didn't do this alone. I didn't do it in a vacuum. Whether it was organizations like the Rotary or the Seroptimist or the Optimist or the Lions Club and the Elks Foundation that gave me a huge scholarship, and all these organizations and individuals who took an interest in me and said that I didn't have to let my past dictate my future. I'm grateful. And you are now the founder of an organization that is going to do just that in some really important areas of impact. And right now you're focused 100% like a laser on making sure that New Mexico is counted. Tell us about that work.
Yeah, so the census is, I can't stress the importance enough. It only happens, like you said earlier, every 10 years. So it's really out of sight, out of mind. We have to do a ton of education every time it comes around because people just don't remember. I can't remember what happened last week, much less 10 years ago. So I think that's our biggest hurdle, is educating the community about what is the census all about. And really, plain speak, census decides where the money goes in our country, period, based on the numbers for each state. So in 2020, there's going to be about $800 billion up for grabs. And $800 billion.
That's 0.8 of $1 trillion, 4/5
Yes.
of $1 trillion. This message brought to you by the Office of the State Auditor.
Yes, I love it. And that's the thing, right? Especially in the Black community, we talk about bringing power and bringing resources to our community so we could do the work we need to do in our community to shore up our own community. The census directly affects that. So voting is extremely important, and yes, you should do that, but right now you want money to go to the Black community, then you need to fill out the census and you need to check Black. So I'm glad we talked about, my mixed heritage, but I understand that in New Mexico, there's a lot of resources for the Hispanic side of me. There is not when we talk about money for the African-American community. We go to the legislature and we hear things like, you're only 2.3 or 8%. That's statistically insignificant. And I get shocked when I hear that, because you're telling me almost 80,000 people that live in this state are insignificant. Their lives don't matter.
Offensive. So offensive.
Right. And so, and then you get the eye rolls. Oh, there's the Black Lives Matter, shtick. But that's literally the case. If we don't count, then we won't get the resources we need to our community. And specifically, the Black community will miss out on $8 billion, $8 billion every single year for the next 10 years if we don't get this right.
No, I appreciate you saying that. Tell us about some of the outreach you're doing into that community to make sure that significant number of New Mexicans gets counted.
Yes, so every month we're hosting virtual town halls. They're the first Thursday of every month. The next one we have is going to be on July 2nd. You can always find information about that on our website. And really, it's just bringing all facets of the Black community together, because I've learned that we have our brothers and sisters that are into sororities and fraternities. Then we have our church folks that are all together. Then we have our academia and the folks that are at, UNM and New Mexico State and Highlands doing their work. And then we have the community folks, where I call the streets, that are doing activism, right? And
hey, that's what we did this weekend, right?
Yes, thank you so much for coming. We celebrated Juneteenth this weekend, and it was, what I heard from everybody was it was healing. It was just healing to be able to be in a space that was for us and have others come and celebrate us. It was, we definitely made sure everybody was safe and passing out masks and hand sanitizer and keeping people spread about the park. But we needed that time to just, especially with what's happening, to just be with each other and heal. And so we did a lot of census outreach then. We had laptops set up and people signed up. Actually did the census. It only takes 10 minutes. You can do it online.
Less than 10 minutes.
Yes.
I mean, I did mine literally in about 4 or 5 minutes. I mean, it is quick.
It is, and they have all the language. They have even Swahili for our folks. We're teaming up with the International District Complete Count Committee to do a fun salsa event. And so we are really just trying to reach out and really just try to get to where the people are. We're doing a lot of census giveaways. So if you complete your census, you can go online and sign up for a giveaway. You'll get a little pack of a bag with a shirt and a hand sanitizer and a census pen that we'll send to you as our thank you for completing the census. But really, it's about, this is something, Black folks, please hear me. This is something you can do right now, today, to help us change things for the next 10 years. Today, fill out your census. We just hit 50% as a state. I'm super excited to see that we finally hit 50%, but we still have a long way to go. We're behind.
Tell us the rest of that story. We're also still in the bottom 2 out of the 50, with Alaska and us being at the bottom. Not a coincidence when you think about the indigenous population of Alaska and the indigenous population in New Mexico, our Native American sisters and brothers, where they're all rural addresses. There's no door-to-door outreach for the census this year because of COVID-19's pandemic. So we have to do different and grassroots outreach. And that means, especially to the African-American community, especially to the Hispanic community, and most importantly to our Native American sisters and brothers who are just not willing or interested or historically comfortable engaging with the government.
That's a big thing. It's a distrust, and that's something that is a theme in all communities of color. The distrust with the government is real. It's warranted, but the only thing I will say to you is, if you have a phone bill, if you have a cell phone, the government knows where you are.
That's right.
Okay, so that, please don't let that deter you from completing the census. My mother's a childhood education teacher all my life. She works with YDI. The money that even they get for their programs depends on the census. My children benefit from. Shout
out YDI. Did you get that shout out? I know Chris Baca sometimes tunes in. That was his big, bold vision, and what a legacy he's leaving.
Yeah,
And
and
Senator
that's,
Padilla, thank you, Senator Padilla. I think you've been on their foundation board for like 20 years, which I don't even know if
yes.
that's legal. You weren't even old enough to be on the board. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry, Nichole.
No, that's great. I mean, that's why I bring up people, because they do take care of a lot of our kids of color. And so if you utilize those services, my kids benefit from Medicaid, those services are directly affected, Medicare, directly affected by the numbers of the census. Another big thing I think people don't realize about the census is if we do not get this right and New Mexico has an undercount, we will lose a congressional seat. Okay, we could potentially lose a Deb Haaland. That can't happen, right? We cannot lose one of our congressional seats. Now, if we get this right, perhaps we could gain a congressional seat. What? Like, so people need to do this because, especially in this political campaign climate, we need all of the representation to our state as well.
I appreciate that, Nichole. Let's cap that off. I thank you, Fred, for your comments. Thank you, Kathy McGill. Sorry you had to go. I know you're going to watch later. And thanks to everybody who is leaning in. We've talked a lot in the last 4 weeks about how to be a good ally. So let me close the conversation about Census 2020 by giving you an action item.
Okay.
Be a good ally to our Black sisters and brothers and their families by encouraging them to fill out the census. That's one way to be a good ally. So we've given you 2 great action items. Number 1, if you see something, say something, right? You see microaggressions or overt racism, you call it out for what it is. Number 2, you encourage the families of color in New Mexico to fill out the census. This is huge. It makes a substantial difference to our economic future as a state for the next 10 years. Count them, 10 years. We don't get a chance to get this right again for 10 years. So that's how you can be a good ally, brought to you by Cafecito con Colon and Nichole Rogers. All right, so Nichole, I want us to close with Westland's Wellstan's phenomenal vision for its next big project. And I know we talked about this at the Juneteenth celebration a bit. I was excited to learn about it. People were excited to talk to you about it. And it's really impacting that next generation of our community in a very substantial and meaningful way, and in an area that we talk about all the time. And that is part of the very bottom and most important of the needs hierarchy. So let's talk about that, Nichole Rogers. What's your vision for Wellstan's next chapter?
Yes. So the next chapter for us, and that's why we picked the census as our first project, because we need to go back to the legislature and say, look, we're more than 3%, because we want to open a group home for kids of color.
Our group home for kids of color. I love it. Keep going.
Yes. This vision came directly as my, like I said, about my work at UNM Hospital. There was a young African-American boy who was having a meltdown in our lobby. And I went over to him and asked what was going on. And he basically was crying and said, I need to know what's wrong with me. And they won't tell me. And I'm like, what? And so sure enough, he was in CYFD care. He had been placed with a family who did not speak English. They were Spanish speakers. And he had just had a heart appointment. And nobody thought to tell him what was happening with him because the family just couldn't communicate with him. So he thought he was dying. He was going to die. And it broke my heart. It broke my heart. And so bottom line is we need to help take the pressure off our institutions like CYFD, like UNMH, and have a place where our kids can thrive. And what we're trying to do is, my vision is like a historically Black college, but for kids. Everything that they need on one campus: healthcare, mental health, mentors, a recreational program. I want a farm and animals and, pet therapy and drumming circles.
Hey, can I do a quick shout out for Mandy's Farm?
Oh, I love Mandy's Farm. Yes, we work with them a lot here at the hospital, and I take them on tours every year. I love Mandy's Farm. Yes. Oh. And that's one of the places that we visited to try to get, learn about this over the last year. We've been just spending time doing gap analysis and finding out what's happening. And our kids, the data shows in New Mexico, Black kids get moved around 7 times before they're actually placed in a permanent place. And that is just, can you imagine the upheaval of getting removed from your family and then bouncing from 7 different families or places before you get placed? There's 100 African-American kids in CYFD custody right now. So we are working really hard to try to figure out how to get all them babies. But in the meantime, till we can, people in the Black community sign up to be foster parents, sign up to help out, be mentors or things like that. You can do that with us. We have a place where you can sign up, but that's going to be a big part of our vision, is just linking people, African-American kids, with people who look like them, because representation matters.
Absolutely. Those kids need to look up and see a reflection of themselves. Now, did you just say that people could sign up for the mentorship program at wellstandfoundation.org?
Yeah, so there's a volunteer link where you can sign up to volunteer, and there's a list of different things that you can do. We're working with Newt Robinson and the mentor network that he's working with APS. And that's our goal, is we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We just want to identify folks in the community that are already doing great things and plug them into the kids that we have. So we love that.
Excellent, excellent. And I'm a huge, longstanding proponent of mentorship programs. I've loved my mentorship, Mentor 2.0 program through Big Brothers Big Sisters is my formal program that I engage with at the South Valley Academy. And I also mentor just countless young professionals who enrich my life every day. But I posted up the main landing page for WellStand. I posted up the mentors volunteer sign up link there. I want to say that I want to point out, and hopefully you'll get to read all these comments after we finish, but Claudia brings up a suggestion of maybe doing that group home in the East Mountains or another rural area, which I think is a great idea. But as we know that our deepest communities of color are often not in rural New Mexico, but in urban centers. You know, our biggest, I think, representations of Black boys and girls and families is in the International District here in Albuquerque, which is, of course, our deepest pocket of poverty. Also in the area where my wife teaches for the last 2 decades plus at Van Buren Middle School. But great suggestion, Claudia, because then you have more space, more place that you can create for your own. And I'm sure Nichole is going to take all that into consideration as she's moving forward with the WellStand Foundation.
Absolutely, and we want to expand. I mean, we want to eventually have them all over New Mexico, but we're really hoping. We're counting on the county, Bernalillo County. We're counting on the mayor. We had a wonderful meeting with Mayor Keller, so that we can get help identifying a building that hopefully we can get donated, so that we can move a little faster. But I'm just so grateful from the outpouring from our leaders that are willing to help, and really now is the time. Now is the time to do this.
Awesome. Now's the time. You know, in the words of our great, who was it? Was it Kathy McGill, or was it was a strong Black woman's voice in my head right now? And I don't remember if it was Kathy McGill. I think it was. But she basically said, enough is enough of saying there's not enough for the African-American community in New Mexico, because it is merely 3% of our population.
That's exactly right. And I definitely love the work that the Black Leadership Council is doing. And I think that we all need each other right now, so that we can, because you're right, enough is enough. Even in our own community, you know, enough is enough for the division. We need to all get together and work on what are our asks actually going to be. So I'm excited to see the governor's task force and see what recommendations come out of that, what's happening in the city with Michelle Melendez in her office. I mean, now is the time.
Now is the time. Enough's enough of saying there's not enough for our African-American community. Look, Black Lives Matter. You matter a great deal to me, Nichole. I appreciate the work and impact you're having on our community. Bree is ready to stand tall with you. She said it was the most impactful interview I've done so far, which says a lot since we've been at this for 4 weeks of strong Black voices. So thank you, Bree, for that. Thank you, PLC, and thanks to everybody who's tuned in today on Cafecito con Colon and this very powerful interview. I'm grateful for the work you do, Nichole. I'm happy to stand with you any day, anytime, anywhere, any reason. And we know that we've got a lot of takeaways from today. If you see something, say something. With microaggressions, racism, it makes the target uncomfortable. So it's time for us to make those transgressors uncomfortable with their actions and hold them accountable. My name is Brian Colon. I'm honored to have been today with Nichole Rogers, of the Wellstand Foundation. Thank you for your great work. Look, folks, people are in isolation. Make sure you reach out and remind them that they may be in isolation, but they're not alone. Reach out to your Black brothers and sisters, and don't just have a Black friend, but understand their lived experience. And that's what we do on Cafecito con Colon, on these strong Black voices. Thank you, Nichole, for being one of those. Make it a beautiful day, and I'm here for you anytime you need me. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for all you do. We're just so blessed to have you.
It's an honor and privilege to serve, and it's an honor and privilege to be with you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
See you again soon, huh?
Yes, sir. Very
And
soon.
thanks for your work this past weekend out at the Juneteenth celebration. It definitely made a difference.
Thank you so much.
All right. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.